So my pranams to both Tiwariji as well as to all the distinguished guests. I convey best wishes from the Haridwar Himalayas on this sacred occasion of Vijayadashmi Dashehra. There could not have been a better day to celebrate such an exceptional congregation. Today is the day when Asurta, darkness, toxicity of the environment was defeated by the light and purity and bliss by Lord Ram. So, on a very special day, I am conveying our heartfelt wishes and Shubhkamna to Dr. Tiwariji for a very successful and pristine beginning of this unique congregation. Always, whenever Kavaladham arranges any kind of event, it is always very exceptional, very insightful, and very thought provoking. And I am proud to say that with Kavaladham, we have had a very long and kind of affectionate bond, like a family bond. So, needless to say that auspicious start of this wonderful congregation as well as the celebration of their foundation day, it has brought earnest happiness to our hearts. We feel so happy and we pray to Puja Gurudev and Vandaniya Mataji to keep blessing them for creating innumerable accomplishments like these in years to come. Now, the topic that has been given by Adharani Dr. Subodh Tiwariji to me to speak for today's event is most pertinent and most timely. But before I dwell further on the subject, allow me to say a few words on the most extraordinary circumstances in which this message is aiming to reach to you. From the lap of Maganga, Maganga is on the right hand side, foothills of mighty Himalayas, Himalayas on the other side, and from Shantikunj, which is the headquarter of all world Gayatri Parivar, which has about 150 million members all across the globe. And these times in which this message is reaching to you, these are historic times because we are right in the middle of a global pandemic and in the middle of a momentous travesty ever seen by the mankind. This COVID infection, and everyone knows that how significant impact had been on humanity. And when in such times when millions of people have been affected and thousands of people have died, when we attempt to evaluate the current times in the wake of such calamity and travesty, then the present times could easily be called as precarious, unprecedented. And in such times, the significance of the divine possibility that yoga offers, it becomes of colossal significance more than ever before. When we think of what yoga can contribute to the scientific research, or rather how scientific research would fortify the yogic science, then I could think of two entirely different types of research methodologies, and not only they come to my attention but also to your attention. First, as we all know, is the qualitative approach, and second is the quantitative type of research, and we have read thoroughly about it. And as most of the audience would know, that qualitative research is where measures are subjective, are principally concerned with the unstructured data, or rather the data which cannot be structured. For example, personal meanings and experiences and feelings and values and opinions. And that is why people tend to call it soft or non-numerical method. But personally, I disagree with such terminology because I believe that the data it deals with, especially in the yogic tradition, where so much philosophical assumptions in human behavior is concerned, it would always be difficult to be quantified. I love my mother. How would you gonna quantify that? I love divinity. My surrender is to a higher consciousness. How can you quantify that? It's so difficult and always challenging. And the second methodology that we employ in yoga therapy research is the quantitative approach, where measures are objective and we conduct a systematic and empirical investigation of an observable phenomena, a phenomena that we can observe, a phenomena that we can see. So the overall idea of this type of research, the quantitative one, is to generate an unbiased outcome, which can then be generalized to a larger population because it would be difficult to make an unbiased approach in a qualitative one. In summary, this is how we can see both of these approaches. Now, before we contemplate further on the theme that I am expected to shed light upon, which is how can we bridge the gap between both of these methodologies, I would like to deliberate a little more on the premise of yoga from a more mere philosophical point of view. Only for the reason because the challenge there appears to be while attempting to bridge between these two contrasting themes is emerging out of that point. The wealth of the Indian scriptures, ranging from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras to Bhagwan Sri Krishna's Bhagavad Gita, and from Gher and Samhita to Artyo Pratipika, and from Upanishads to Vedas. They have made this absolutely clear to us that the true purpose of yoga is the inner renunciation of desire, chitta vritti nirodha, purification of the chitta. And hence, what it aims is to transcendence this concept of the birth with an ultimate aim of the union of human soul with the highest and purest consciousness and to accomplish the final frontier of human adventure, Paramatma. It is called Paramatma because Param, Atma. There is nothing beyond it. You cannot go beyond it. Eko Deva Sarva Bhuteshu Gura Sarva Vyapi Sarva Bhutantaratma. It is the one that is there. Every single being. It is inside. Karma Dhyaksha Sarva Bhutadivasa Sakshi Cheto Kevalo Nirgunasya. And if the attempt is actually to reach to that ultimate adventure of the human consciousness, then when we or if we or should we limit our research on yoga or yoga therapy to one of these dimensions without making an attempting to know that how Maharshi Patanjali or Bhagwan Sri Krishna or Guru Gorakhnath have arrived to that particular understanding or that specific understanding, then there is a good chance that we would absolutely miss the most precious contributions that this Indian wisdom tradition could make, because most of the outcomes that yogic practices could yield can only be accessed by a specialized inner method of inquiry. It is all inside. And knowing that, in my humble opinion, bridges the gap between these two paradigms, that is the Setubandh between one peninsula to another. And the reason I say it, because sometimes it becomes confusing if we only focus it to the superficial and like the shallow aspect of it to understand what I'm trying to say. Let us try to make an attempt to understand the preciousness of the human life that we are born into, and we can say that this opportunity that we have got of human life is either a blessing or an accident. If it is an accident and a mere chemical reaction was responsible for I to be here, then there is no harm in wasting this opportunity. But if it is a blessing, like scriptures are saying, like Ramcharitmanas is saying, Bade Bhag Manuj Tan Pava, Surudurlabh Sadgranth Hi Gava, that we got this human life from divine possibility. If that's the reason, if the reason is what Acharya Shankar is saying, Durlabham Trayme Vetet Devanugraha Hetukam Manushyatvam Mumukshatvam Mahapurusham Shaya, that this human life is like a divine blessing, then it is our duty to understand the possibilities that it offers, like Bhagavad Sri Krishna is saying in Gita, Buddha Yukto Jahatira, Ubhe Sukrita Dushkrite, Tasmat Yoga Yujusva Yoga Karma Sukaushalam. That yoga is the excellence of all actions. The kushalata in the karma is the yoga. And that kind of possibility where our every single karma, physical, social, psychological, emotional, every single dimension reaches to its pinnacle, to its summit, to its Everest, is what yoga is truly offering. There is a very beautiful story that I remember, and this story is of a man who heard from somewhere that next to the river that he was living by, there were millions of stones, like you get to any bank of river. And one of the stone he heard that was a stone of Paras. Paras is a mythological stone. You touch it to any kind of metal and it becomes gold. So he wanted to have it, but how would you have? All of the stones look the same. So he developed a routine. The routine he developed is that every morning he would walk with the iron powder on the left and he would pick up the stone, touch it here, turns to gold, fine, otherwise throw in the water so that he won't have to pick up the same stone again. 1 week this went on well, but then it became a habit. He absolutely forgot that why he was picking up the stone, touching it here, and throwing in the water. Became a habit, just like we get the habit of living the human life, waking up in the morning, doing the same thing that we have done like thousands times before. He did the same thing. A week went, a month went, 2 months went, a year went, 10 years went, 20 years went. 20 years later, one day he picked up the stone, touched it here, threw in the water, looked to this side, turned into gold. The stone was gone. Same is with the human life. By the time you can understand that this human life was there so that yoga karmasu kaushalam could take place, checkout notice has been served, time to go. So if yoga offers such an opportunity, then how could we quantify such a dynamic and transformative process? That's the question. The listeners would recall that in the third chapter of Yoga Sutra, Patanjali is talking about the exploration of the inner realms, vibhutis, that contain in access to wide range of loka, subtle worlds. Again, the question comes that how could we quantify these subtle forms of happiness and harmony and an ascension into a higher dimension and the quest of truth and the purpose and meaning and a sense of oneness with our eternal identity that Patanjali says Sada Drishtu Swarupe Vasthana? How could you quantify that? In summary, what I'm trying to suggest before we start to talk about the uh, more scientific and methodological aspect is that for the benefit of the science, I would say, as well as for humanity, and as well as for yoga, and as well as for research, it would be worth exploring the possibility of that bridge that could combine the yogic based methods of subjectivity with the rigorousness of the scientific inquiry. But for that to happen, we must employ yoga and science as equal partners in this research process. We should not see the science only from yogic perspective. We should not see the yoga from only scientific perspective. There should be a bridge where both are equal partners. And the reason I'm saying it is because the current hierarchy of research evidence cannot truly do justice to the yogic methodology. I'm sorry to say that, but I'm sure that all the researchers would agree. For example, if you look at the levels of clinical evidence, the critical evidence, or empirical based outcome, if we say, then according to SACET, which is the highest level of research evidence, then you would see, okay, large randomized controlled trial with clear cut results. That is the highest point of the hierarchy. And the items used to assess the rigorousness of a randomized controlled trial, how would we quantize that? Then you need randomization and blinding. And that is the challenge because how would you blind it? Person conducting it knows that he is doing yoga. Person participating it knows that he is doing the yoga. So a true kind of double blinding would always be absent in a yogic intervention research design, and that is not the only challenge. There are many inherent challenges in making that bridge. Then there is also the related issue of privileged access, because which means more like that each human being can only have access to his or her own consciousness, and hence it becomes difficult to do the research upon impact on of yogic therapy interventions on such subjective domains, especially the consciousness or especially the areas which are very subjective in nature. Now, I'm not saying that the solution to these challenges are not possible, they are possible. Just the approach requires to be slightly non conventional. This is what I'm trying to say, that if we are aiming to make a bridge, then we should be able to take the risk of going for slightly non conventional route, not the absolute second based approach where like large RCTs are required. and not only the completely subjective approach where only the person and guru can understand the change in the dimension, but somewhere in between. And to change the approach, first of all, we should see that yoga and science as partners rather than enemies. After all, they both require, if we look at it, they both require sincerity to the discipline. They both require academic integrity. They both require devotion of the individual. And they both have their own support communities. For example, if there is a seeker on the path of yoga, he's looking for support, then he would be looking for support in his peer groups and yoga centers, universities offering yoga programs, clinical settings offering yoga therapy, ashrams, gurukuls. These are the peer groups that that person has. And then one following the path of science would equally look for research institutions, hospitals, scientific establishments. And they both are supported by a rich body of literature. Science has got a rich body of literature, and yogic practices have got a rich body of literature. So what I intend to say that the approach is not drastically different from one to another. And most importantly, in my humble opinion, yoga therapy is actually the bridge where both science and yoga meet. Try to see it from this perspective that for long we have looked at the yoga and science as standing apart, but actually the yoga therapy is the bridge where both are meeting. One following the path of Kaivalya, passing through the stages of Sampragyat Samadhi, Viveka Khyati, Dharmamet Samadhi, may not need a double blinded, randomized controlled trial to confirm the vibhutis that he has accomplished. It's not his path. But one seeking the suitable yogic treatment for osteoarthritis would be better treated if there is a sensible clinical evidence supporting it. So there is no need to confuse the two. They are actually meeting at the meeting point of yoga therapy. And how can we overcome these challenges? In my modest opinion, the first possible way to overcome these challenges that I earlier talked about, like related to inner inquiry and related to the wealth of the scriptures from where the concept of the yogic wisdom is arising, that kind of challenges, we can overcome them by using the clinical case studies because they have an advantage of indicating the areas which deserve further study. We may call them translational research, which means that they are translating the ancient wisdom into a contemporary understanding. And there are very good results in some cases from such efforts. I remember that studies conducted by Abnazar confirmed effectiveness of a yogic module given to a patient who had undergone total knee replacement, and he was advised bilateral hip replacement. So then using that data, the further research could be done. There were substantial benefits experienced by the patient after the yogic intervention. Now this kind of information, because it is coming from a clinical case study, it could lead to a new area of clinical exploration and bridging the gap between these two extremes. Second way to deal with these challenges is using the prevalent analytical methodology, which includes the use of anatomical, physiological, pathological, biochemical, molecular parameters to see the effects of the yogic therapeutic interventions because they are dealing directly with what is happening inside the body. So you give one yogic intervention and then you can check the parameter, which is a commonly adopted practice in, say, for example, in the master's students of our university, and equally in Kavaladham, equally in Asvyasa, equally in Patanjali's Yoga Institution, all the premier institution, Morarji Desai Yoga Institution, also in Santa Cruz. All the great institutions, they are using this kind of methodology to assess it, and there are thousands and thousands of examples to confirm that. What we can do, however, is that we can use the same elements that help to assess the quality of research in the quantitative studies to assess the quality of work in the qualitative research as the yoga therapy. That would help to increase the transparency, clarity, comprehensiveness of the observations and interpretations, and it would also ensure that the data collected is free from errors and confounding factors and biases and inconsistencies, all other problems that would make a research weak. In this relation, I would wish to say that the cross-sectional studies, for example, and prospective designs with a control group, they are equally good. And if the factors that I just talked about, they have been duly monitored, and then it could have been even better to bridge the gap between the two. The reason I'm saying it is because some people are determined to prove from the day one that the yogic intervention would bring a statistically significant outcome. And I would say that a good research should only do the exploration, because even if it is bringing a result that this yogic intervention was not of benefit and it did not give us any statistically significant outcome, then what is the harm? It is actually adding a, a new piece of evidence, and that would help not only the researchers but also the patient. Their clinical practices, the entire therapy is being guided by the research that we are doing. So it is a duty of the researcher, duty of the guide, duty of the institution, peers, mentors to ensure this, because only a collective effort could make this happen. This is a service that we are doing not only to the science, not only to the honesty, integrity, and the rigorousness of the yogic approach, but also to the humanity. This is also true that sometimes, even after ensuring every single parameter that I talked about, not such a good work would get all the praise. And sometimes a very good quality research work, I have seen it happening few times, is ignored because it does not fit the popular notion. But that should not stop us to make the righteous and tireless efforts to make this happen. So first I talked about to have the clinical case studies. That could be one way to bridge the gap, which most people are trying already. And second is to increase the robustness of these parameters that we are using. And third approach, it may involve conducting large population surveys, which is something that we probably need to do. Multiple institutions need to come together to do large population surveys, which could be then used to determine these effects of these therapeutic interventions, whether they are actually having any statistically significant positive effect upon a big group of population or not. Then only it would be possible to reach to this conclusion. So I believe that these are the effects that are needed to bridge the gap that is currently taking place between both kinds of these approaches. And now, because this message is reaching to you on a very special day, I'm sorry that I could not join you live because of some issues that made me travel for today. So I am recording this message a day before to you. That we shall also remember that this message is reaching to you on a very special and sacred and auspicious day, and this is the day of Vijayadashmi and Dashera. So I wanted to say a few words on that occasion also, that we shall remember that right now we are passing through more or less the same time as the time there was there in front of Lord Ram, where a collective decision that we would take now would define the course of humanity. At the time of Lord Ram, he had two challenges at the same time. He had a challenge to defeat the Surta. Lanka was needed to be demolished, but at the same time, Ram Rajya was needed to be established. So, yada yada hi dharmasya glanirvavati bharata abhyutthanam dharmasya tadatmanam sujamyam. The Durjan needed to be defeated, and Sajjan needed to be protected. And same is the concept of the yoga. Yoga is looking for that kind of balance, a harmony. And we are now also in a similar kind of position where we have to make a decision between external and internal pursuits. And the reason why I'm saying that making that decision has become so important, because without making that decision and without finding that delicate balance, it would not be possible for us to walk blindly on the path that we means humanity, have chosen to walk in last few decades. To know that we are at the crossroads, we don't need to read a research article. We don't need to enter into an online debate or Facebook. We just need to ask ourselves that now, when we have got all that we desired for, where our lives have got all the shine and sparkle, that under these glittery surfaces and shining exteriors, why we have a life of pain and misery and sorrow and strife? Why we have so many people with broken, hollow, and empty hearts? Now people have money but no satisfaction, prosperity but no contentment. Houses are bigger but families are gone. I may have millions of rupees and dollars, but that could only help me to purchase a food in restaurant, but not the hunger. We can purchase a bed but not the sleep. We can purchase a house but not the family. And that's the sad story of the current time. And the reason why I'm saying that making that decision has become so important right now is because you and I, we all together, and we means humanity, have now reached to a point where without finding such a balance, the balance that yoga offers, it would not be possible for us to walk blindly on the path that we have selected for ourselves. And to know that we are at a critical point in the journey of the humanity, we don't need to read many research articles. The answer is not there in a research journal, it's not there in an online debate or in a Facebook. But we just have to ask ourselves that now, when we have got everything that we desired for, when our lives are full of all the shine and sparkle in the world, then why underneath those shiny exteriors and glittery surfaces we have got a life of pain and misery and sorrow and strife? Why there are so many people with hollow, empty, and broken hearts? People have money now. Where is the satisfaction? Prosperity is there, much better than before. But where is the contentment? People have got bigger houses than ever before, but where are the families? The truth is that with millions of rupees, dollars, or whatever the currency we have, we can purchase best kind of food in the restaurant, but not the hunger. We can purchase a bed, but not the sleep. We can purchase a house, but not the family. And that's the story of almost every single individual in the modern time, where people have got everything that they seek and desire for, but just the life is full of much stress, tension, and strife. And the reason this happened, because for long we have been dreaming a dream from which we are just waking up, a dream that if we just give money to every single soul, then people would be miraculously happy. Truth is different. Truth is that when the money is there, prosperity is there, then the struggle for survival gets subsided. But then the real question of the life becomes important. Survival for what? Now people have means to live, but no meaning to live for. To have meaning in the life, we need yoga. Because yoga is meaning, yoga is purpose, yoga is harmony, yoga is balance, yoga is equipoise. In Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan Shri Krishna says, Yogastha Kuru Karmani, Sangam Tvektva Dhananjaya, Siddha Siddhyo Sabho Bhutva, Samatvam Yoguchyate. Yoga is nothing but the balance within and harmony outside. A very beautiful story I remember of Lord Buddha's time. There was a prince called Shrotra. When he heard the discourse of Bhagwan Buddha, he became a monk. And after becoming a monk, he started to do everything opposite. Everyone would walk on the normal, proper road. He would walk in the bushes. Everyone would eat normal, nutritious food. He would not eat for days. Health started to go. He was in severe pain and despair. So Bhagwan Buddha came to see him, and he said that Shrotra, before you became a prince, you were a before you became a monk, you were a prince. He said, yes, Lord. He said, and when you were a prince, you used to play veena, which is like an Indian guitar. He said, yes, Lord. He said, tell me one thing. Lord Buddha asked him. He said that if strings are too tight of veena, what would happen? He said, there would be no music. And he said, if strings are too loose, what would happen? He said, there would be no music. Bhagwan Buddha said, same is with the life. You can't tight it too much, you can't lose it too much. It should be samyak, gently balanced. And that is the purpose of yoga. the same kind of balance is needed between these two approaches to bridge the gap. And the essential purpose of the yoga should be kept at the center, because yoga asks us to refine our human consciousness by eliminating the bad habits, evil tendencies, kusanskars that we have gathered upon by journey after journey, life after life. And the sole purpose of the yogic adventure is to accomplish the purity of the body, clarity of the mind, divinity of the consciousness. And that final frontier of human adventure cannot be achieved without going through a process of transformation. And that's why Puj Gurudev, Pandit Shri Ram Sharma Acharya ji, imagine, like, he was such a groundbreaking scholar that he wrote more than 3,400 books in Hindi and Sanskrit, and started this revolutionary movement, thought transformation movement, Vichar Kranti Abhiyan, which now has millions of members, thousands of centers worldwide. And he talked about the way transformation of the individual and society could take place. And for that to happen, he said three things are needed. Swasth Sharir, which could be accomplished with yogasana, yoga therapy. Swachh Man, which could be accomplished with the spiritual practices, and Sabya Samaj, a refined and civilized society, which could be accomplished with the help of collective yoga. And I would like to end by quoting what he said on such a issue, current times. Imagine that he wrote these words in 1987, 88. It's like he was writing this morning, and he said that while the current situation looks dark and gloomy, it should not bring fear or despair to us. We should embrace it like a call of action. It is a sign, it is a symbol that we are born at a very special time, very unique, exceptional time, when entire mankind is called to accomplish the most important and daring task that it has ever been called to accomplish. Current times demand a new level of collaboration between different nations, sectors, society, races, religions, because this is the first time in the history of the world where every single person has been called to work together like one single family. And that I would share, because current times, when we are trying to bridge the gap between two methodologies of yogic research, we should also try to bridge the gap between two human hearts. Because if methodologies are broken, we can repair it with the statistical techniques. But if hearts of human adventure and existence is broken, it would be so difficult to repair it. Current times are requiring us to work together to usher the humanity to a new cause and new purpose. Thanks for so patiently listening. My pranams again from Haridwar Dev Sanskriti Vishwavidyalaya. I am extending a warm invitation to all of you to come and visit us whenever the time permits. Thank you, Dhanyavad, and Pranam.